that was the first time we had ever considered ending our relationship. I would say first and only time. And we've now been married for 5 years. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. This is Crystal Adesanya. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm so excited to take you along as I share with you my IVF journey of how myself and my husband, who are both sickle cell carriers, had our baby. Story time. I remember very vividly the day that myself and my husband found out that, well, I was a sickle cell carrier. He had always known he was a sickle cell carrier, so he had the AS genotype. I, on the other hand, I had a feeling, but I wasn't quite sure. So the first thing I did, which is crucial if you are someone from who's African or from African descent, is to find out. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is actually not knowing until further along in the relationship, until it's too late. In the past, a lot of people really didn't know, say they just had babies and those babies had sickle cell disease. But now with a lot of advancement in technology, etc., you can really find out if you're a carrier or not. So one of the first things I did was go to the hospital to do a test. This was a genetic test where they told me whether or not I was a carrier. I remember that day talking to a friend of mine. I was like, oh, I think I'm falling in love. Oh my God, yada, 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 yada. But I'm so scared because he is AS and I'm not sure what I am. So I'm about to find out. I was like, oh my God. The question she asked me was, what will happen if you find out you're also AS? And I was like, well, I don't know. When we get to that bridge, we will cross it. And that's exactly what happened. Once I got my test, I remember receiving this test and I was like, oh boy, how do I share this information? How do I break this message? So what I did was the same envelope that they gave to me, I carried it and I literally just gave it to him. I was like, hey, I got my test back. Here you go. And this was like 3 days, approximately 3 days after he had asked me to be his girlfriend. Isn't that insane? That's so crazy. Anyway, once I gave it to him, he took the test and he opened it. He was like, oh no, oh no. And I could just see like all the feelings, all the thoughts, everything he's ever been told about being a sickle cell carrier and the dangers of dating someone who was, etc., had just come into his mind. And he was just like, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. It was such an emotionally draining experience for both of us because we were like, what do we do now? What does this actually mean? And the first thing we did was consider ending our relationship, believe it or not. And mind you, this person had been my friend for about 8 years now, and we had known each other through everything. But the one thing we didn't know was, again, one thing I didn't know was whether or not I was a carrier. And that really didn't come up until we started dating. And I just remember it being such an emotional, oof, thinking about it right now. I remember it being such an emotional decision for both of us because we were clearly in love with each other. We had just started a fresh relationship. Our relationship was 3 days old because I had been talking to him about finding out what my genotype was, even as friends. So by the time we knew things were kind of like heating up a little bit, I decided to go do that test and find out. So he had just asked me to be his girlfriend. I remember it being on the 3rd of January. 3 days later, I found out that I was a sickle cell carrier. Oh my God. That day was one of the hardest days of both of our lives, I would say. Even though hard things have happened, that was the first time we had ever considered ending our relationship. I would say first and only time. And we've now been married for 5 years. And back then, I remember, giving him the test. And then the next day, we just stayed in bed all day crying and being so sad and feeling so defeated. And we were for certain that our relationship was going to end because we had heard so many stories of people ending relationships because of this. We had heard so many stories of people having kids who were sick, and we were just like, this cannot be us. This cannot be our reality. This is not what's going to happen. I remember we both called my mom, and I had just told her about this person, and I just told her how excited I was, etc. So we got on the phone and I was like, oh mommy. And I never call my mom for things like that. And I feel like this process just got us to become really, really close, because then I started to share things with her, and her feedback and her responses and everything was filled with so much love that I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna do it. I remember we called her and we told her, and mind you, my mom is not a medical professional. She does not know a lot about the disease and everything like that and all the things you're supposed to and not to do, but she knows enough to know that there are things that are possible. Not your typical African mom, yeah. I tell you that. But once we called her, we told her, and the first thing she said to me was, I think it is important for both of you to go and do your research. You're both in healthcare. You have a healthcare startup. He has a healthcare startup. Why are you guys having this conversation? And I was just like, you know what? Yeah. She was like, yes, through God, everything is possible. And there's so many things, science, da 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 da. And she was just talking and talking and talking. And I don't know if she knew it, but she was just speaking life into us in that moment. And then we just went ham and we went and did some research and research, and we found out all the different solutions that we had to do to be able to have a healthy, happy baby. And that is where we landed on IVF as our option. One of the things we did as a first step was to do some genetic counseling and talk to the professionals about what the steps are. So they gave us a few options. The first option was to get pregnant naturally. And in that process, about 10 weeks in, when they typically do all the genetic testing of the baby, etc., we would find out if we had a sickle cell carrier or if our baby had sickle cell disease, and we could make a decision. And I was like, what do you mean decision? Essentially what that means is you could decide whether or not you want to terminate that pregnancy. For me personally, I was just like, I can't do it. I don't want to go through that experience. I don't want to have to make that decision at that point of my pregnancy. So for that reason, that option was ruled out. The second option, of course, was to go through IVF, and that included getting my eggs retrieved, going through the process of actually fertilizing and doing genetic testing, and then figuring out which of the embryos created could be a healthy embryo without the disease and we could move forward with. So, whew, once we found out that information, I tell you, we were so excited. We were just happy. And we're like, you know what? There's steps, there are things we are convicted together to make this decision. And this is what we're about to do. The most important conversations we had when we decided to move forward was, hey, life is going to be hard. If life is going to throw really, really difficult things at us throughout our lives, who in the end do you want to be with through those hard things? That was the one question that solidified for us the fact that it had to be two of us. Like, we were both equally yoked on every level, financially, spiritually, physically, mentally. We were both pushing each other towards our goals. We were working on so much, and we're like, what if something tragic happens in our lifetime? Will we both be able to take care of each other? And the decision was, I would rather be with this person that would be my rock, my everything through my life, versus trying to find someone else because they were not a carrier. It was that simple. And once that was the decision for us, we decided, okay, let's go do our research. Mommy, thank you. You are right. You're always right. And we did our research and we found the best solution to go forward. We prayed about it, we talked to doctors, we talked to counselors, we talked to different people to make sure we were on the same page. This also made myself and my husband extremely close. When you make a decision like this with your partner, I promise you, you and your partner, if you get to that point, will become better for it. So I'm so excited to share more about this journey. In the next video, I'll be talking about financial things that we had to consider while making this decision. Now, thinking back to everything, I'm really like, wow, like, I wish I had this kind of information back then, because I wouldn't have felt so much of the weight on my shoulder. and I wouldn't have felt so much of the sadness and anxiety and everything, because I had heard about IVF, but I had never heard of people who were doing it for this specific reason, and I didn't see a lot of positive outcomes, etc. We just knew it was something. We looked at solutions that could happen after having a child, like going through like the bone marrow transplants and all the new innovations, technology, but we just said, well, we don't want our child to go through those pains if we had a child that had the disease, so we would find another solution ahead of the problem. Me and my babe, we decided to go through IVF, and when I tell you it is one of the best decisions we have ever made in our lifetimes, that will be an understatement. I want to cry thinking about it. Uh, I'm very happy because we chose the best solution for ourselves, as we have the most beautiful, wonderful baby girl. For those of you who are watching this video specifically because you and your partner are both sickle cell carriers, welcome. I hope this is helpful. Share this with anyone you know who needs some advice or needs some help, and I'll see you in the next video.